Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Other members are right. It is an honour and it is an absolute privilege to rise in this place and to speak about this bill. I want to dedicate my comments to the memory of my father. My father was a member of the trade union. He was a painter and a decorator and would only take union jobs. And my father was also an ardent second-generation Italian member of the New Democratic Party and active volunteer all his life. And I can tell you why he was an active volunteer all his life of the New Democratic Party, because he had lived through Liberal and Conservative governments. He saw what they had done, even back then, vis-a-vis working rights and collective bargaining issues. I remember him talking about the dirty 30s. He was a person who had lived through that, who had seen joblessness, who had seen the lack of rights. And you know, it's worth, Mr. Speaker, to actually remind folk as they're watching this about what unions have done for us and why collective bargaining and unions are so critical. They are critical to our democracy. They are critical to our civil rights. And it can never be said enough. We give credit to the unions for weekends. I know my colleagues here don't see too many weekends. But if anybody gets a weekend, it's because of a unionist. That's right. If any woman has women's rights in terms of pay equity in their workplace, I can tell you that's probably a unionized workplace. It's because of a union that they have those rights. Most people watched, I gather, the last episode of Breaking Bad last night. And there's a funny little thing going around the Facebook and Twitter, and it has a picture of, you know, Walter White, the character from Breaking Bad. It says Canadian Breaking Bad. It says number 1, health insurance pays all his cancer fees, and number 2, it says the end. Because honestly, the entire premise of that, you know, incredibly popular American television show is that here is an individual who did not have any public health insurance, and he was a teacher. So I can tell you that a union, if you've got public health insurance, you can thank Tommy Douglas and the New Democratic Party for that, but you can also thank a unionist because they fought for it. And if there's any question in anybody's mind that there is only one political party who represents the rights of organized labor, this bill, Bill 74, reaffirms that yet again that is the case, decade after decade after decade. Why do I say that? Well, even in my short time here, in my 7 years here, this is a government, the McGuinty-Wynne government, that voted down anti-scab legislation. We proposed anti-scab legislation. They voted it down. This was a government, the McGuinty-Wynne government, that supported, along with the Conservatives, Bill 115, which took away, unprecedented, the teachers' unions called it, took away the collective bargaining rights of teachers. Teachers who had, many of them had supported Liberals running in their various ridings. That's just in the last few years. And again, card check certification won by some, but not by all. This is a government that did not support it for all workers, even though we proposed it for all workers. And again, the backdrop, the horrific backdrop to this action that we're speaking to today, an action, may I remind viewers, to support a bill, Bill 74, within an omnibus piece of legislation that benefits only one company, a company that in 2010 made $3.39 billion in revenues. One company, this government, the backdrop to this is an Ontario where since the recession of 2008, we have lost hundreds of thousands of good-paying union jobs, and we have replaced them with temporary part-time contract work. An incredible study that was put out by Workers' Action and the Ontario Labour Federation shows that almost 50% of our jobs now in Ontario are precarious. What does that mean? That means when asked, the person said, and when asked the question, will you have your job for sure next year, they said, we don't know. That's precarious employment. And this is in a province where in my father's day, these comments are, really said in his honor, my father's day on one salary, one union salary as a painter decorator, he could support a family, one salary, a house downtown, a car in the driveway, and along with some other relatives, a summer cottage. Imagine now the reality that our children face. On 2 salaries, you can barely afford the down payment to a condo. Why? Because the vast majority of those salaries are not unionized jobs. They're not union safe, secure, well-paying jobs with benefits. They're precarious employment. That's the big difference. The emptying out of the middle class, the fact that Canada increasingly is seeing the wealthy get wealthier, the poor get poorer, and the middle class emptying out, is exactly because we do not have more unionized jobs. That's directly responsible for that. If you go to a social democratic country, and my husband and I have, you go to Sweden where there's an 85% unionization rate, 85%, just imagine that for a moment, you don't have poverty. Poverty is a curable disease. The cure for it is a good job and a good house, a place to live and a place to work. That's the cure for poverty. Really, they don't have it there. And in most of the Scandinavian countries, you don't see it the way you do here because people have housing and because they have work and because that work is unionized work. It's work that has a good salary and it has good benefits. And of course, concomitantly, because of the high unionized rate in those countries, what do you see also? You also see better civil rights, you see pharmacare, you see dental care, you see health care, you see child care. Mr. Speaker, imagine a jurisdiction that actually provided child care to its women workers, good child care, not the kind of child care we see here in Ontario. Deplorable, much of it, unsupervised, unlicensed, the only child care you can get. You see, even child care is a union issue, even child care. When you look at poverty, when you look at the incredible poverty rates and how much it costs us, I was just looking this up today, about $10 billion a year, $10 to $13 billion a year. That's what poverty costs in the province of Ontario. 10 to 13 billion a year. People say that's counterintuitive. How can it cost us money? I'll tell you, it costs us money in health because, as we all know, poverty is a social determinant of health. It costs us money in the criminal justice system because people who are marginalized spend more time in and out of that system. It costs us more money, especially child poverty, in terms of the long-range aspects, and women's poverty costs us money too, because women without good jobs cost the system. Poverty costs us. The government knows that. We know that. We know it costs less to put somebody in a hotel than in a shelter. We know these things. Why do we not have the political will to do something about it? I'll tell you, we don't have the political will to do something about it because of the influences upon our current government. And that's what I'll talk to next. Because when we look at this programming motion, and we keep in mind people like my father, people who used to have a good union job, who may not anymore, and certainly are looking at whatever is left being under threat with this legislation, we'll see an omnibus bill that has a few things in it. It has a Skin Cancer Prevention Act, Anti-Tanning Bed Act that was brought in by the member from Nickel Belt that everybody agrees with. It has a Regulated Health Professions Amendment, spousal exception, which is brought in by a Progressive Conservative. Everybody agrees with it. It has the Stronger Protection for Ontario Consumers Act, Bill 55, which everybody agrees with. It has Bill 36, the Local Food Act, which everybody agrees with. It has the Wireless Services Agreements Act, which, although, like the Local Food Act, doesn't do much, everybody agrees with. It has the Carbon Monoxide Safety Act, introduced by Progressive Conservative, I think, many, many times. Everybody agrees with that, too. Registered Human Resources Professional Act, these are all, you know, this is the bill really built to deal with regulations. Everybody agrees with it. And then, in the midst of it all, in the midst of universal agreement, legislative agreement, all parties agreeing, you have, voila, Bill 74. Fairness and Competitiveness in Ontario's Construction Industry Act, a very nice title. Lots of very bad things are done under very nice titles. The bill for Ellis Dawn. Our leader, Andrea Horwath, this morning moved a very simple motion. She moved the motion that said, just take that bill out. Just take that one bill out. Now, imagine, what's the problem? If there's so much contention, if the Superior Court ruled on Friday that Ellis Dawn could get what it wants and tear up its collective agreement, why is this bill so critical? So that the Liberals voted no, did not abstain, voted no. We will not take this bill out. One has to ask, what's the motivation for the Premier, Kathleen Wynne, and the Liberal Party to be so gung-ho that they're willing to go to the wall for this one bill? And, you know, I would direct people's attention to Adam Radwanski's article in the Globe. It's pretty specific. It's pretty to the point. He mentioned some numbers: 125,000 donated to the Liberal Party by Ellis Dawn, 32,000 to the Conservative Party from Ellis Dawn. If I were the Conservative Party, I might feel a little slighted by that, maybe. They're supporting the bill, too. But there you go. He mentions other things, too. He mentions meetings with lobbyists, some of which you've heard from my colleagues. He mentions that. Pretty well draws the picture, Mr. Speaker, of why we're focused on this bill. You know, I would appeal to my friends across the aisle in the Liberal Party who have bills of their own, Mr. Speaker, that could have made it into this programming motion, but were slapped across the face by supporting a Conservative-introduced bill to support Ellis Dawn while ignoring their own private members' bill. Let's point to one in particular, the one put forward by the member from Niagara Falls, who resigned recently. Perhaps that was part of it. The grandparents' bill. He's introduced this bill, at least 3 to 4 times since I've been in the House. That's not in here. That's not in here. There are other bills. You know, I can think of the member from, where is he, Scarborough Southwest. He introduced his bill, a very compassionate bill for animal rights. That's not in here. Slapped him across the face, too. You know, we could go on. For every member in the backbenches over there, there is a private member's bill put forward by a Liberal Party member that got ignored. They ignored their own to work for Ellis Dawn. Truly, they're working for Ellis Dawn with this bill. This is a shocking, talk about abrogation of union rights, this is a shocking use of this legislature. You know, again, my father, hardworking individual, like many hardworking unionists and non-unionists who wish they would be unionists. My kids wish they had union jobs. I mean, most of our kids wish they had union jobs, those who are looking for jobs. And by the way, that's a lot of kids. That's 17% of our youth are unemployed right now. We're right there with the Rust Belt states in terms of employment for our youth. And that's why we push to get money towards that in the budget. Most of these folk would love to have union jobs, and yet we are attacking collective agreements and union jobs after all that I've just said. Are we really working in the direction of the right-to-work states? I mean, that was mentioned, and I think there's some validity in that. Think about it. You know, I was asking how many right-to-work states there are. Right-to-work, by the way, is a really Orwellian way of saying right to work for less money, right to work for slightly over minimum wage, right not to have collective agreements, right not to be protected by a union. That's the rights of the right-to-work states. And yet we're seeing this government with Bill 115, with the anti-scab legislation that we proposed that they voted down, and now with Bill 74 heading in that direction. And here we see, of course, the meeting of minds, Liberals and Conservatives acting together. And really, again, going back to my father, it's no different than it was in the 30s, the 20s, 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. I remember my father talking about, Trudeau 1.0, the first Trudeau. He was no hero in my household, I'll tell you.
Well, not mine either.
Because when my father was out on strike, guess what the first Trudeau said to him? I can't even repeat it here. It's an expletive.
Oh, no, I remember that.
That's what he said, and he's famous for saying it. That was the first Trudeau. Also, by the way, took away all of our civil liberties with the, another bill. We won't, kind of get away from the topic at hand. But anyway, that was the Liberals back then. That was a height of Liberaldom. That was the height of so-called, their glory days under Trudeau. And here we have again. This is not an aberration for my friends in the Liberal Party. This is who they are, Mr. Speaker. This is the very DNA of the Liberal Party. This is what they stand for. They stand for, like the Progressive Conservative Party, big business. That's what they stand for. They don't even stand for small business. They stand for big business. And here we have the most graphic example of that one could possibly ever see. A bill that's trumped even their own backbench members, private members' bills. It's trumped all sorts of things that they could focus on in this House. We won't even begin to imagine what kind of bills could have been brought forward. It trumps it all. It trumps their own self-interest in many ways. It trumps everything, because who they really represent are the forces of big business. That's the reality. And in that, they share something with the Conservatives. I will give a nod to the Conservatives, by the way. And I said this, I posted this when Tim Hudak was reaffirmed as leader. I said, they have principles in the Progressive Conservative Party. They're all wrong, but they have them. They have principles, they're all wrong, but they got them. But my Liberal friends, what are their principles? I don't know. But I can tell you one of them, the critical one truly, is to get re-elected. That's the critical principle. That's the one consistent operational policy. But, when you look at their economic policies, when you look at what they actually do, here is a classic example. Bill 74, tucked neatly into a programming motion of other bills that we all agree on that could have been sent through the House very, very, very speedily. And as my friend, the House leader, the member from Timmins, James Bay, says, a bill to shut down debate of the Conservative Party by the Conservative Party. So there is no other logic. There is no other logic to this than that. So just in the last minute and a bit, I'll say I don't understand support. If anything I've said is wrong, contradict me for sure. Come on, stand up, say it, and vote for a motion. Just take Bill 74 out of the programming motion, and I'll happily eat my words. Just do it. Do it by the end of the afternoon. We still have a few hours left. There's still a few speakers left. But if I'm actually right, and my father was right before him, and other workers before them, that really this is just representative of who the Liberal Party really is, then stay the course. Stay the course, my friends. And again, to just a shout out to all those unionized workers, to all those who are organizing as we speak, to my father and his whole generation that really paid for, in many ways, with their lives for the right of organized labor and collective bargaining. This is one of those moments in this legislature in Ontario when, again, the rubber hits the road, we see who truly is on your side, who truly stands up for workers' rights, and who doesn't. And again, to all of you out there who try to make the world a better place and try to make workplaces better, and to all of those who fought for civil rights as part of union rights, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hopefully, they'll remove Bill 74 from the programming motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.